Timber construction is deemed to be the most sustainable solution for the looming crisis in post-pandemic construction industry. Many examples elsewhere have shown the advancement of timber construction. In other countries, they have built up to 10 stories timber skyscraper, and they are slowly becoming into the mainstream construction industry. However, in Malaysia, ironically, where quality timbers are exported, the timber construction sector seems rather sluggish to keep pace with the development abroad. Okay, the forum will focus on mostly non-design issues, also on top of design issues, as maybe our panels will share today. Okay, it will expose you to the width and breadth of issues in timber in modern construction. With such understanding, students will be able to establish a unique value proposition, remember UVP, in a competition that they are required to participate as part of their course assessment. So let me start the forum by asking our panel, okay? First of all, interested in doing timber in construction, kenapa minat dengan timber sebagai bahan binaan?
So actually, bila saya mula dalam bidang construction, I started with civil construction biasa lah. So it's very competitive and very it's not that easy lah to get jobs. Okay. Then at the same time, the demands for wooden houses, especially for resorts, homestay, is high lah. Then I started. I changed from civil construction to timber, so lebih easy dikenali sebagai carpentry firms. So in Malaysia kita tak ada banyak carpentry firms. Okay. Then I started to get my team. I bring in architects, engineers, draftsmen, QS, and then we started one project, two projects, three projects, and that is how I started. And then the hard point, wooden construction typically there is kampung-kampung lah, because we cannot masuk kawasan PBT, because majlis will ask for us to comply with all the CCC requirements. You need a bomba, CIDB, everything lah. So I have to comply. So then we start. We do kampung-kampung, tanah pertanian, is out of majlis coverage, PBT coverage area. Then one day I heard about this engineered timber. So in overseas, they are more advanced lah. I think they should have more than 20 years doing this engineered timber. It's blue lam or blue laminated timber, CLT also, cross laminated timber, and few. So this engineered timber is a future construction because they're sustainable. They all find out that if we take, let's say for example, pasir, sand, or batu from quarry, we cannot replace, or biji besi for steel, we cannot replace, or silica for glasses. So if forests, we do the tebang, sama ada kita tanam semula, replanting, or naturally grow back, it's a sustainable material for construction. So I nampak this is the future. So I approach UPM and we start together to discuss and find direction to go for this engineered timber. So now we are doing that.
Thank you very much, Ramli. Very interesting start, and I think we can gather from his explanation that the pain point or the springboard for his passion in construction is sustainability. When we start to see the problems in the market and the environment and the looming crisis, and like he said, concrete and other building materials soon will run out. So let us move on to our second panel, Associate Professor Architect Meor. I would like to ask maybe a little bit of the background of the project. What are your involvement in Project Rumah Banjir? And can you describe it a bit, how timber came into the scene and then has to be pushed out a bit from that project, please.
Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Zaky, for inviting me to this forum for ARC5701. Okay, going back to his question, let me go a bit further back. I have to confess that I've never done timber structure. Well, in a personal basis, yes. My family retreat in Parit, Perak, together with my late cousin. We designed like a homestay for 3 families using recycled timber that we gathered from the kampung nearby, the timber houses that was left. So we bought the materials and designed, repurposed it, and reused again the timber, which are about 100 years old. Some of the timber is still in good condition. And my involvement with timber actually started way back in 2013, actually. When together with Prof, we developed this timber IPS using grant from MTIG, and we did promotion in Manchester, if I'm not mistaken. So we brought over the model of the timber houses to promote that timber IPS. But again, at the time also, the prices, the cost of having this timber structure quite expensive, so it's meant for the higher end, the elite. Nobody can really afford timber at that time, 2015. Okay. Now going back to the Rumah Banjir, well, before that also, my involvement with timber actually together with Dr. Zaky started in 2014 when we ventured into kampung orang asli, Tapak. So we see the needs to replace some of their homes, which are quite horrible to live in. So we start the so-called Teratak Semai project, where together with our students, volunteers, and sponsorship from NGOs, from government agencies, we build their homes as a community project. So the project is still ongoing, but due to COVID, we put on hold. So we managed to build about 50 houses using timber and also bamboos and bertam, like with panels that they can gather from their surroundings. So in Tapak, if you are familiar with the waterfall in Lanta Iskandar, so there are a lot of houses along the trunk road going towards Cameron Highland. So we managed to have about 50 homes built for them from sponsorship. Now on the Rumah Banjir, actually we didn't start off with Rumah Banjir. Actually, Ramli was invited by the state government of Pahang.
Just to clarify, Rumah Banjir means flood houses.
Sorry,
okay.
Flood for the flood house to replace their home that been destroyed by flooding. So November 2021, actually, we presented to the state government of Pahang the 3 types of houses. One is, they call it Rumah Rakyat Pahang, which is the low cost housing. And second is Rumah Makmur, which is the intermediate, the medium scale house. And the third one is the Rumah Prima Pahang, which is the prime house of Pahang.
the high end. So after presented, they say okay, so we come up with our design and so forth. But during the presentation also, when we mentioned that we're going to use timber, a lot of negative perception. So one of them is, what about insurance? Do you think insurance will cover timber houses? One. What about fire requirements? Do you have certification from bomber? Or ceiling, for that matter? What about authorities? Will they allow you to go there? So we are talking about mass housing. But Ramli mentioned just now, he did his project in rural area, in kampong, in villages, where you don't need to get authorities approval. But for mass housing, definitely, you have to submit your plan, and then they will look at your materials and they will comment whether you have all these certifications. So that will be your pain point of actually dealing with the authorities to negate the negative perception, I would say. Yes, timber is nice, a living materials compared to steel or concrete. Yes, it's warm. And I remember Dr. Zaky also had a studio to work on spirit of timber.
Oh, yes.
Studio year 2. So they did a performance based on the research on timber. I think you should do that also. Try to find the soul of timber, the spirit of timber. So you have to have that passion for timber. In our department, we have Dr. Wansri Hani also. So passionate about timber. Because it's timber is not easy to use for do-it-yourself housing. That's what the Teratak Smart is all about. DIY house. That using timber is flexible. That any non-skilled laborer can, with a manual, they can build the houses themselves. Okay, now going back to that, sorry, jumping around. So once the big flood, late December, so the state government informed Ramli, can you quickly design us a so-called rumah banjir, homes to replace the houses that been demolished by the flood. So based on the data, I think for Pahang, Selangor at that time, about 1,800 require new homes. 1,800. So we quickly come up with our proposal, 2 or 3 proposals, and the state government liked our design. And now it's still waiting from the Menteri Besar, Chief Minister of Pahang, to approve one site where we can build our sample home using timber. But even that also, we have to switch also, has to be hybrid. Because the flat house needs to be raised up on stilts, because they want to put down at the exact where they lost their house. To them, that's home. They cannot simply relocate. So we have to think about what if there's another flood. That's why we have to raise our design on stilt, but the base has to be concrete at the time. Again, to negate the negative perception. Having timber posts. You know it can be done, but again, we have to start slowly. Okay, from there, the top part also, as mentioned by Ramli, we intend, initially we want to use CLT, the engineered timber, cross-laminated timber, but that one is so costly. We did a Zoom meeting with a supplier in Indonesia, so they also said no, it's not worth it to have that for the flood victim. Cost is enormous. Okay, now we have to rethink. So now the base will be concrete and the upper floor will use composite materials, what we call wood plastic composite, that consists of 70% sawdust and also 30% polymer or plastic material.
Plastic.
So that's the journey of rumah banjir. It's not straightforward. So that goes for any project also. It's not a straight linear progress from design to completion. There will be a lot of humps and bumps along the way. So I think I need to stop now.
Okay, thank you, Architect Meor, for that. I remember when I did the Spirit of Timber, it surprises me when students studied the significance of timber in various cultures. They have mythology, they have dance, they have song, they even have worship ritual based on timber species and timber construction. I cannot imagine they have that kind of similar richness in terms of humanity's aspect of timber. If you talk about concrete, if I ask you to do a play or song about concrete, I think we will hit a blank wall. There's no spirit in that kind of material. Okay, apart from that, you have seen that there are various factors affecting the process of innovating and introducing timber into the mainstream. I would like to ask Encik Ramli, with all the problems we have faced, do you really think and believe that timber construction has a future in Malaysian mainstream construction? Okay.
Terima kasih, Razali. Sebenarnya memang saya percayalah, yakin dan percaya timber construction ada good prospect in Malaysia. Because number one, our timber export a year is about timber and furniture export per year is about 22.5 billion. Most of
22.5 billion,
setahun.
Wow, it's almost like the same value of our food export.
Yes, meaning that kita ada banyak kayu, we have a lot of resources of timber lah. But I think 60 to 70% we export sound timber. Sayang lah kita tak guna sendiri, okay? Kita export, and then most of the country yang beli sound timber, they buy cheap, very cheap. Actually our timber is very good quality. Only we have to break the ice lah. Maksudnya kita kena pecahkan policy. We also talk to the state government. Now talking with MTIB, Malaysian Timber Industry Board, untuk permudahkan polisi untuk timber, and then future we will work together with Bomba and how this timber to get all the formal. So I think we are the team who want to break the ice lah. Together with UPM. And just now Dr. Zaky mentioned about something special about timber. In US there is one study, one hospital they build guna timber. The patient recovery, the patient who stay there less pain from the patient who stay in the concrete room.
Interesting.
So meaning that timber is very close to kita lah, manusia, and we can release our pressure. For example, when holiday, weekend or holiday, most of the KL people sekarang trending, they all looking for resort dalam hutan, resort, natural resort yang buat dari kayu, and then ada green semua. We are all back to nature lah. And most of the youngsters now, they are sudah familiar dengan itu a few words that for example green, eco, sustainable, apa lagi? So this is the future. And the young generation now, they semua nak come back to nature. So as future architect, I think that is one direction.
Yeah.
So I still believe timber will be the best. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so basically, we still believe the prospect that timber can be a solution for our future construction problem. And it's a pity that we export a lot of good timber, 70% of the timber we export, but we have scarcity and problems in using them in our local construction industry. And also interesting when you mentioned about the effect on psychology, how people stay in, timber wards recover faster than those who. The same thing in other sort of studies, when you have hospitals with a lot of natural ventilation and daylight, the speed of recovery is faster compared to those hospitals where they use a lot of artificial lighting and mechanical cooling. I would like to go next to Architect Meor. We know that there are a lot of facilities and assistance given by the government to push the timber agenda in our main construction industry, but somehow we still are rather slow to pick this up. Do you have any idea what they could have done differently to help our local innovators, just like Ramli or even constructors, to play a more important and make them easy to push for timber as our agenda?
Okay, on that matters, I think you guys know which agency that oversees the timber industry? Anybody? I think Ramli mentioned it just now.
Anybody know what are the agencies? Can you name one agency that's supposed to have timber construction in the in local context?
I think Ramli mentioned it just now.
Yes. This is a sort of a quiz. Just any names that berkaitan dengan timber you can mention. You want to try? Siapa nak try? Were you listening? Okay, apa dia? What was it? Yeah. Malaysian Timber Council. I was
MCC, but the one there's MTIB.
MTIB, yeah.
Nation Timber Industry Board. So under MTIB would be MTC.
MTC, yeah.
Right, Nation Timber Council, and Dr. Zaky got a grant from MTC actually.
Yeah.
For his timber sculpture, another design competition, and the student won.
Yeah, from this class as well.
Oh, this class.
No, I mean the same course.
Same course, but
different bachelor, they are seniors lah.
Okay, going to MTIB, yes, they have a lot of grants, fund. In fact, from the Timber IPS also, we got that grant from MTIB, Prof time, 2013. So we developed that concept, but unfortunately, did not get the desired result. And I think one of the grants that MTIB has is so-called levy grant. I think both, our together with the Ramli, we are trying to apply for that grant for the production of CLT in Malaysia, the first one ever, inshallah. So hopefully with that, then we can produce our own cross-laminated timber for our timber industry. So I think we are going to aim for one factory, MTIB's timber mill somewhere in Pahang. Hopefully we can get that to be in operation. That would help us to produce the so-called mass housing for the state of government Pahang, if they are still interested to have that agenda. So to come up with that, so MTIB will be one of the agency. Another one is what? That deal the species.
The one that focus on trees and forest. The word forest is already there.
And of course, research also is there.
Forest research. Frame, yes.
Frame, Forest Research Institute of Malaysia. So they did a lot of research on that species, timber species in Malaysia. And one also on innovation. We just had, a discussion, presentation by NTIS.
NTIS, yes.
NTIS about innovation, and there's a sandbox policy actually. Sandbox policy where new ideas can give a grant to help develop that idea of prototype. So we are thinking of having that, so and maybe for our Tata Smile, we can innovate to use many different kind of materials also. Even the design so can be slightly bigger and also upgrade. So maybe we have to customize version 8.0 now. So many versions already. Okay, so frame NTIP, and what about the forest? FSC.
Forest Stewardship.
Council. Forest Stewardship Council also. That's on the timber plantation. So meaning you have to have your plan for reharvesting, and so you have to have a proper plan to manage the forest. So in Pahang, for example, well, we are hoping to collaborate with Yayasan Pahang to get the timber from there, raw materials, and Ramli will do the processing of the timber in MTIP's factory. So you need the full cycle from farm or plantation, and then again to the farm.
Okay, thank you. Architect Meor already touched on something which is very important to innovation, the word sandbox policy. Sandbox policy, if you imagine, sandbox is where children play safely. They have a lot of sand, so they can do a lot of mistakes without, they can fall on the sand without hurting themselves. So one thing about innovation is they are new, they are not tested. So what is needed is that, for the regulations to accept the fact that these are not tested yet, they are not proven yet. So for example, you introduce the innovation of driverless car. Okay, you will not get it on the road right away, because no way the JPJ or the Department of Transport will allow that, the issue of safety and so forth. So sandbox policy would allow the testing of such vehicle on public road without having police or JPJ or the Department of Transport to arrest the owner of the vehicle. So it allows you to test your innovative solution in real world without having to meet certain regulation. So that is something that you need to think about. Innovation needs some sort of play scenario where you are allowed to make mistakes. Okay? I would like to move back to Encik Ramli in another important issue, that is the issue of craftsmen, carpenters, tukang. I think this is one of the the pain points in our construction industry. We don't have a lot of craftsmen who and the one that we have are of traditional type, and when they die, we don't have people, younger people who take over the trades. So maybe Ramli can touch a bit on this. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. Yang paling headache for contractors is craftsmen lah, tukang mahir. So Malaysia kita tak ada ramai skill workers untuk timber house, timber buildings. We don't have any skill workers, so we have to rely on foreign workers, especially from Indonesia. But after several years, they are going back, and we're facing the same problem lah. So kita tak ada tukang lagi. So that's why future timber construction, the best is kalau kita boleh buat IBS IBS ready to install. So semi-skilled workers also can install the houses or the structure, everything with some manual there. Then the other pain is cost of foreign workers salary also increase. Labor cost lah, and then the diesel cost also increase, especially for logging area. The cost of machinery, the excavator, the bulldozer to do the logging, and then that's why wood is expensive. Not because how to say, because from logging area to hardware, they go for a few process, a few factory. From logging, we go to the stockpile area. Then from stockpile area, we send to sawmill. From sawmill, we go for clean dry or anai treatment. That one. Then from there, we send to this profile factory to do the profile.
And these are all different people, different factories.
All different factories. So that's why the cost of timber is expensive. But if for logging area, before they do the logging, they have to do the EIA report. They have to comply with all the flora, fauna, the wildlife. So the report millions, depends on the areas, on the acreage. That's why when the product sampai hardware, or the price per feet maybe 20 ringgit, 30 ringgit, depend on the species, then the tukang will mark up double. So the product, the finished product, sure very expensive. Yeah. If we can do IBS, meaning that we can control from logging, we do our own factory to do the panels, everything, and then we do all the process, and then we also install on site. Maybe our price will be maybe very competitive. Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Ramli. That's another scenario maybe you are not aware of. The issue of craftsmen, the issue of bringing supplies to the market. A lot of they are not optimized, they are not streamlined. So eventually, our timbers become more expensive than concrete even. Whereas they should not. So these are the issues that are pushing us away. Okay, it is interesting that Ramli mentioned the word RTA as one of the solution of overcoming the short supply of craftsmen, of tukang. Maybe Architect Meor can enlighten the audience a bit on the concept of RTA and why it is important in our proposal in the Rumah Banji.
Okay, RTA is actually developed by Dr. Razali. RTA short form for ready to assemble. It's being patented. It was patented at UPM where she did her PhD. It's for self-built housing. And I think RTA developed from another method called single method. So that one also you need to do your research. Way back in 1970s, the single method on timber DIY with yourself. So ready to assemble is just like a method where any less skilled person or even without any skill, you can build your own houses with a proper manual. Just like we did with Ratat Smile, we have our student volunteers. Some of them even know how to use tools, but they managed to build that frame of the houses for the orang asli. Now with the concept of RTA, you can reduce a lot of laborers side, so you can have your own team to assemble. So even the naming of the profession also need to be rebranded. Like tukang, for example, carpenters. Now we can call them fabricators.
Fabricators.
Or installer, like IKEA, when you want to install, they call themselves installer. Tak panggil tukang pasang. So even fabricators, the one that work in factory, there's so many chain, then you call them fabricators. Perhaps that can be that. And also this RTA also, now we will change it to what called RE-RETIS.
Oh, RETIS.
We'll be branding it to RETIS, or what we call ready to install structure. So each formula can be developed together with Ramli that can be used for timber construction. Okay, and going back to the prices of materials, yes, it's a real thing. The prices have increased tremendously. So in fact, I had a discussion with one of the contractors that is doing the MyTeakwood homes. So MyTeakwood, of course, was during the Bangsa National government 5 years ago to build about 50 houses, low-cost houses. And he also used IBS, but not timber. So due to the price increase, he cannot maintain. He tried to negotiate the price, but can't. Even though there's a provision for negotiation, but still cannot get any profit. So he has to terminate. I mean, the state government terminated his services. So I'm being the submitting person also. Because the design, but have to terminate myself also lah. Have to. So once you leave a project, what do you need to issue as an architect? Is it beside professional practice? Anybody knows? If you are the submitting person, so because you are under the contractor, a design build, then in terms of the submitting person, what shall you do?
Have you taken your professional practice class yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So of course I have to relieve myself from as a submitting person. I have to issue what release letter. Because I'm employed by the contractor. If the contractor is terminated, automatically myself also has to be terminated. So in order for the state government to appoint the architect, I have to issue a letter of release to the authority. Then they can appoint the architect to oversee the remainder of the project. So this price increase is real. It's plaguing our construction industry. As mentioned by Ramli and Zaky, timber is the most practical solution. Provided we manage our forest properly, that's all it takes. Now, a lot of negative perception, right? Logging, rows of being deforestation and so forth. It also has to be looked into. The harvesting, the proper harvesting of timber. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Meor. Maybe there will be a few more issues I would like the panel to discuss a little bit later. But I would like to, at this point, to open the floor to the audience. If you have any question regarding what have been discussed, or do you have any ideas that might give us some hope of solving the problems? Anybody? Yeah? Any question? Yes. Mazu, yes. You can use this. You can switch it on.
You have mentioned that pieces of timber so that it can be ready to install. So compared to the initial timbers, how is the process of RTA when it's in the factory? And also how, like compared to both, how is the cost for both types of timber?
Okay, thank you, Musa.
I'm not the expert, I'm the one here. But okay, RTA is just a system, a method of construction. So meaning that the timber has to be pre-cut at the factory to whatever sizes that have been determined. So RTA have this module, the modular system, that the column has to be this height and the sizes have to be this size. So that has to be predetermined.
So there will be no cutting on site.
Yes, everything done in factory. So once you have that predetermined size, easier in factory to cut to size, and then you bring to site to install. There will be a manual showing, okay, this item A will be there, and then you hook up with this item B using nuts and bolts or whatever connection.
So that means these special pieces are still comparatively cheaper than having a skilled workers on site?
Yes, it's cheaper because we reduce the labor cost at site, and it's much cleaner. Then the site will be that messy when you have done all the fabrication, the cutting and whatnot at the factory under a controlled environment.
So that obviates the needs for the tukang to be on site, because like Ramli said, we are having problem of scarcity of tukang, and sometimes our tukang ni dia kerja ikut angin.
Yeah, they're temperamental.
They're temperamental. If they don't feel like the day is not good for them, they will not come to work.
They feel like they are artists,
Yeah, they are like artists. So in a way, it's unreliable, especially when you talk about mass housing.
Yeah.
So the idea of RTA was like Meor said, that you are installer. You just you don't cut the timber on site. You just, whatever being supplied by the supplier, you just need the local people who understand the diagrams, and then with a little bit of instruction they can put it up. So you don't need this special craftsman. And now it's even more critical because our craftsmen come from across the straits from Indonesia. So if suddenly he wants to go back for 2 months, what happened to the project? Okay, so that's interesting. Okay. Okay, Cik only want to add on that.
Actually, for cost comparison, this RTA or familiar in overseas, they call it prefabricated houses, prefab. Of course, the cost is less cheaper because number one, less waste. Number two, the timing for to do the construction is shorter, the time. So meaning that the cost will be cheaper. In US now, 30% from new housing development is all prefab houses that built in factory. In UK, their KPI now to build one house every 2 hours 30 minutes, one house factory. So that is
2 house in
per house, 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Oh, 2.5 hours per
2.5
one house.
hours
Wow.
per one house in UK.
In factory.
So this prefab or ready to install, ready to this RTA. This is the project training also lah. Then now it's we try to most of the country they try to do this wood house is trending, meaning that in Malaysia this wooden house normally people see only for kampung-kampung orang, for people in the kampung-kampung. So no standard. Okay, so what we do now with modern element, we build a wooden house, plate with glass, with this stone, so can get how to say modern look lah, modern look and become trending. So people now, I think if the high-end market, people now build wooden house, 1 million something, 1 million ringgit, 2 million ringgit, they will spend money as long as the house modern look. So we have a medium-low market, medium-high market for timber, but this is the trending. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ramli, for that input. Maybe we go another one last question to both the panel. Maybe Architect Meor, if the students are to propose innovation in timber construction, what would be your advice for them to make the innovation a successful one?
Of course, an innovation, well, has to be original also, has to be fresh. And I think if you are going for a competition, there's an approach that you have to look into. Maybe try to a bit of review on competition, design competition, and see what's the winner's proposal looks like. Maybe I could suggest that you look at Washington Memorial competition. Look at the ideas that the winner proposed. Something totally different, but yet till now, it's really people, the public still appreciate that. It's called Vietnam War Memorial, if I'm not mistaken, in Washington DC. I managed to visit it at that time. So very profound. But it's a simple structure. So have a look at that. So maybe that's the same approach that you have to be different. And I also did enter a few competitions during my working time at Architect MA. And one thing that, well, most important is also your so-called killer perspective. I remember when we had that, we entered the competition and we were shortlisted. So we had all the drawings of the final shortlist competitor, and at that time, Tun Mahathir was the Prime Minister. It's for National Gallery, National Art Gallery, Razali, and what is passing through, and suddenly caught eye on our exhibition, the National Art Gallery, and we got it. You don't need to elaborate on your concept, whatnot, to me. That one single image somehow stuck in Tun Mahathir's mind, and then that's it, you got it. So that's what we had in Jalan Tun Razak and the National Art Gallery. But that was not the initial idea. We had a much more elegant solution, but being a design and build, at that time YTL, so knowing design and build contractor, they first try to cut costs. So they obliterate our design completely. So we have to somehow pull out. We terminate ourselves from paying that 17%. If you don't like what they have done, they have butchered the design so bad. So we have to pull out as the architect. But though we want that competition, that's not what is intended like. Okay, just for your knowledge. Okay, going back to that innovation, we need to be fresh and simple solutions. Sometimes still be the best. Don't overcomplicate your solution. Again, get that spirit of timber. I think that should be your focus. Design sometimes you cannot do much already. This is international or local?
One of it is international.
Okay.
And one is local.
Alright. So again, international and local different approach need to be taken. So I think that's my view on this. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe one last question to Cik Ramli. These are future architects that will be working for the nation. Maybe you have a word of advice. What should be their relationship with timber in the future? Because as you said, you believe that timber is the solution for a sustainable future. So what would be your advice for the young architects? I believe at this stage, they are thinking of fame and money and popularity and whatnot. So a word of advice on how they should have the relationship with timber.
Okay, number one, spend some time, go into the forest and take a feel. Just imagine 30-story, 20-story trees can stand alone like that. I believe you can do buildings in future. Okay, number two, when you practice your architecture, for new building is okay, but for renovation, one more headache. Okay, because you have to make sure renovation, of course lah, they want to look more cantik lah, more pretty. And then new building also be careful with BO, variation order, because most of the owner sometimes when the project complete, they want to change it, change that, then at the cost, then your workers pening, headache, then that's all the problem you will be seeing. So, okay, that's my advice.
Thank you very much. We have heard both our panels sharing, very important perspectives, and ideas that you cannot find in textbook these days yet. So I would like to next open the floor to the audience, to the students, or anybody who would like to ask a question.
Good evening, my name is Meor. So my question is a little bit going back to the mass production of timber housing.
Okay.
So I have a question regarding whether are there issues for those who are currently living in wooden houses, because I have a grandmother that actually stays in wooden houses. So with that, there will be also maintenance issues. So if we actually mass produce this in Malaysia, are we actually ready to handle the maintenance issues? Or will it result in a lot more specialists needed to maintain these houses? Thank you.
Who wants to answer that? The issue of maintenance. Good. From the perspective of those who already live in a
actually, either wooden house or normal house, by bricks or by concrete, we also need to do maintenance. Normally, they will repair the house. If normal house, normal building, most of the owner, maybe after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they repair the house. Same goes for timber house. We need to do the maintenance also. So if you look after, if you do good maintenance, every 5 years you put the paint or put the oil back, the house can last longer. Maybe can last for a few hundred years. Okay. Prof, I don't know.
Well, actually, timber has been used in mass housing previously. I remember my father-in-law's house in Alostar, Kedah, built by UDA, Urban Development Authority, called Taman UDA. He also on stilts and using timber, and also Felda also. Felda houses, this scheme, also using timber. So it's not new actually, right? Just maybe the negative perception that has been giving a bad rap on timber industry. somehow we have to overcome that. So I don't know about your grandmother still living, so maybe you can ask her how she deals with.
She moved out.
Oh.
It's hard to maintain.
Oh, okay. Yes, sharing my own experience, I used to live in a traditional timber house, and the house still stands and still looks good. And I remember my grandfather every year or two, he had to go to the forest to buy the special resin from orang asli to paint or apa ni kita cakap lacquer the timber, because it's a sort of protection. Okay, and I think the mentality of maintaining a timber house is slightly different. You need to think that the timber house is a living organism. Okay, and if you take care of it properly, it can last many years. I know of a temple in Japan, timber temple, which lasts for 3,000 years. Okay, but the timber, one thing about timber is you can replace the components as they deteriorate. Maybe by now, the original, none of the original timber pieces is there, but the temple looks like it has never been replaced, or it stays like that. So I think it's the attitude of living with timber. And if you go to Fakulti Bahasa nearby, you can see about 4 or 5 timber houses. They are old timber houses, original timber houses relocated from hundreds of miles away from the country. And one of the house, the Terengganu house, I was personally involved in the relocation of that house. When I went to Kuala Terengganu to take the house was it was not in bad condition, but it was not taken care of. You couldn't see the house because it was covered with zinc, with extension, with cheap plywood extension. So when Dr. Fauzi, the head of the project, stripped off all this new extension, ugly extension, then you can see the original structure. Yeah, I think it has stood there for nearly 100 years, and they were taken apart bit by bit. And the connection, it's amazing. The joint between the structure and the floorboards are timber as well. They don't use nails. And I don't know how they put 2 planks together with timber dowels that exactly match the location. I don't know how they do that. So we carefully disassembled the house, and now it is in the Fakulti Bahasa Modern, and it has been restored, and it looks very beautiful, and people use it for or wedding photo shoot, whatever occasion there is. It's almost like treating a living person. If you don't love it, it will show that that resentment against the treatment. So I think that's an attitude of how you live in a timber house. Thank you very much. Any other question regarding the things we discussed now? Anybody want to ask technical issues, technological issues?
Maybe you should pay a visit. Can you enter the house?
I think you can. If you just walk into Fakulti Bahasa Modern, you can enter the house. It's just that I don't know what the condition is now.
Yeah, and one house also that has been rebuilt again. They're selling the house.
Selling your house.
Yeah, maybe students can pay a visit.
Where is it now?
I'm not sure.
I heard it has been relocated.
Negeri Sembilan, somewhere. Negeri Sembilan. It's won the Aga Khan Award. Designed by G. William.
Yes, selling a house. Please have to look it up. Okay. So the timber houses not only can be relocated, it can also move. It can also walk. You have seen videos of people moving timber houses, because in the villages where they live by the river, sometimes they have to relocate the house because of the flooding and the erosion of the river bank. So they can move it up to 200, 400 meters away. They just, call a lot of people, gather together, maybe 100 to 200 people, and they just leave the house up and they move 400 meters away. You cannot do that with steel houses or concrete houses. Okay?
Anybody from Kelantan? one of the oldest mosques in Malaysia. One of the oldest mosques in Malaysia. So the timber, using timber, the Masjid Kampung Laut, the Kampung Laut Mosque, is now being relocated. Has been relocated to its original location from Nilampuri to Kota Baru. So it's exciting to see all the timbers, panels being reconstructed and rebuilt again. So giving new life, rebirth of Masjid Kampung Laut. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they tried to finish before the Shawwal, before the Eid.
Lastly, I would like to thank our panels today, Encik Ramli and his team members. Also, thank you, Associate Professor Architect Meor, for sharing with us today, and very insightful sharing. And hopefully you all benefit from the discussion. So that's it. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.